Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about aspec representation, specifically your opinions on aspec representation. In this video series, I take your opinions on a topic, on a question, on a prompt, and form a discussion about it. This way I can get the opinions of many people and kind of get a broader view of what the ace and arrow community, and specifically the slice of ace community, I guess, thinks about these topics. So be sure to leave a comment down below on your opinion on the next topic. The next topic, before we get into today's video, the next topic in this series will be about aromanticism and asexuality and how they intersect. The next video in this series will be about attitudes towards sex. How do you personally feel about sex? Are you sex favourable, sex indifferent, sex repulsed? How does your aspec identity intersect with your sexual interests or lack thereof? What misconceptions do you think may exist about how aspec people feel about sex? But with that out of the way, let's get started on your comments. Starting with something simple, Bavin Xiao says that they just want asexuality and aromanticism to get mentioned. Even now, they think that a lot of people don't understand asexuality and aromanticism, so having that mainstream appeal could be very helpful in increasing people's understanding of what these orientations are. And yes, I definitely agree with this. I think that a lot of people still don't know the basics about asexuality and aromanticism. It may seem like you're treading over the same ground again and again, but it will be important to people having this baseline asexual and aromantic representation. There have been cases of it, like in Sex Education and in BoJack Horseman, but there really aren't that many examples of good aspec characters. Similarly, Christian Role says that all representation is good representation. They would even be happy with a side character just showing up, but obviously a main character would be preferable. Christian here makes a really good point that there are so many different experiences in the aspec communities which deserve to be shown in media. In order to have good overall aspec representation, it's important to represent a variety of aspec experiences. If every aspec character that shows up in media turns out to be an alloromantic, asexual, white, cis woman, then that's not a good diversity of representation. There are so many identities and intersectional identities that affect the way that you may experience life as an aspec person, and those experiences deserve to be represented in media. Esther Not the Egg agrees with this as well. There's definitely such a breadth of experience that is not being covered if you just stop at coming out and discovering your orientation, and that deserves to be seen. Ranjaza would like to see more platonic relationships in the media. More examples of people who are building their life together but with no romantic interests. Platonic relationships and QPRs more specifically is something that really hasn't caught on in the general consciousness, I guess. While asexuality is something that's starting to break through in a few appearances here and there, it's often in the form of either no relationships altogether or romantic relationships specifically. Platonic relationships are so important in our community, especially for arrow people. And I think that in representing aspec people, you should then be representing the relationships that they may want to pursue. Crazy Kung Fu Girl agrees with the importance of platonic relationships in media. They don't necessarily mind about having explicit ace or arrow characters on screen, but rather just emphasizing the importance of friendships and platonic relationships. I definitely agree that friendships are something that are often not covered as much or as deeply in media. It's seen as almost hierarchical, with friendship at the bottom below romance and sex. Crazy Kung Fu Go notes that this wouldn't only help ace and arrow people, it would also help allo people who may struggle with the friendships and the platonic relationships in their life for whatever reason. Marco Gorsa says that as a homoromantic ace guy, a really good example of ace representation that he has seen is the character of Alvin in the book Ace of Hearts. Marco says that although he doesn't know the word for asexuality at the start of the book, he does have a picture of what his orientation is, even if it doesn't have the language for it. The book is more about him trying to find a romantic relationship than trying to discover his asexuality, which is something that he is already comfortable with. I think a lot of time with representation, the pitfall that you can fall into is just doing a coming out story and figuring out your orientation and stopping there. As if the only thing that may make life difficult as an asexual or an aromantic person is coming out. Obviously, this isn't true. There are so many facets of your life that may be affected by being aspec, and I think that by expanding the story past a coming out stage and trying to live life as an aspec person and all the things that may change about the way you do experience life is important, and it would be a really interesting story to tell. Genesis is curious to see ace representation in literature and in music, which is not just tokenistic. Absolutely. I think that queer identities, if you're going to represent them, you shouldn't just treat it like a checklist of things that you have to include. If you're going to include a queer character, include that queer character because their queerness is important to them as a character. It doesn't have to be their defining trait, but being queer in our society does affect the way you interact with it, whether you like it or not. Having a character whose whole purpose in a story is to say, I'm asexual and this is what that means, is not really that impactful. That kind of thing can easily be found on, well, the internet. I think when you're talking about representation in media, it's more important to create a character who the audience can empathize with and thus can kind of put themselves in the shoes of that character and see how they may experience life. I personally want characters whose queerness, whose asexuality or romanticism is an important part of their character, but it is not their sole defining trait, and that part of the character was included for a reason and intentionally, not just to fulfill some quota. And that just about wraps up all the comments I had on the previous video. Just as a reminder, next time on this video series, which is going to be in about 4 weeks' time, we're going to be talking about aspec attitudes towards sex. So if you have any thoughts on that discussion, then feel free to leave them in the comments below. Just a quick shout out before I go. During this video, I've been wearing this Ace Pride flag shirt with a bunch of cats on it. A bit of background on this. When I first started the channel, I bought a similar shirt to this. It was an old design in a different color as well. And recently the artist who designs those shirts reached out for me and offered to send an updated design for free. They didn't ask for anything in return, but I thought it was only polite to shout them out since they were kind enough to send this to me for free. So this was designed by Irene Co, and I will leave a link to the shop where you can get this design as well as aromantic, pansexual, bisexual, a bunch of other pride flag cat shirts and hoodies and stuff in the description below. It's actually really comfortable and I love subtle pride things and things with cats on. So if you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like. I post videos every Saturday, so if you want to see more, then feel free to subscribe. That is all I had to say today. Have a wonderful day, and I shall see you next time. But rather just emphasizing the importance. Specifically, your thoughts on aspec representation. Are you tired? Are you tired?